Hey, 4xe fans, I've seen a lot of posts, a lot of questions about form, fuel oil refresh mode, and if you aren't familiar with that, this video might be for you. The question that gets asked is, how do I get out of fuel oil refresh mode? That is a loaded question with several answers, and so I'm going to kind of quickly go through all this to try to help you understand what it is, what you're looking at, what the possibilities might be, and what some of the problems are with that. So it's fuel oil refresh mode. That's fuel oil refresh mode. So the first part of that, the fuel refresh part of it, the Wrangler 4xe and the Grand Cherokee 4xe are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Manufacturers of PHEVs know that having stale gas in the gas tank is a possibility, because if you're doing a lot of electric miles, you're not burning gas. You could go a long time. I've gone several weeks without running the gas engine, and I usually go a month between fill-ups outside of the recalls. So you can have a lot of electric miles, but that gas is sitting there getting old, and it'll kind of like destabilize all over time. So Jeep put a 90-day timer on the gas tank, and if you don't fill up in 90 days, or at least add some gas in a 90-day window, it will trigger fuel oil refresh mode, but it's just for the fuel part. Unfortunately, it's not for the oil part, it's just for the fuel part. And it would be nice if the system would tell us that, but it doesn't. So all you really have to do in that case is put in 4 or 5 gallons of gas, and it will reset that 90-day 90-day clock on the gas tank, and it'll reset the form. The second part of that, the oil refresh mode, this is where it gets confusing. The 4xe has a direct injection engine. Direct injection engines are problematic from the viewpoint of getting oil dilution. And what it does is it injects fuel in the system for system start, so the engine start. And then if you don't get the vehicle up to temperature, it doesn't burn that excess fuel off, and it can get into your oil. Now, this happens all the time. This happens with regular non-direct injection engines, but it can become a little bit more of an issue with a plug-in hybrid, because you can have a lot of short engine runs and a lot of repeated engine runs. And what the vehicle can do, this is especially the case in the cold, because the system puts in just a little bit more fuel to ensure a good engine start. And if you don't get the system, the engine up to temperature to burn that off, that fuel is going to end up in your oil. Now, the 4xe does not have any way of like knowing that, like with a sensor. There's no like viscosity sensor in there or anything picking that up. It's all software based. So the software is going to estimate, I shouldn't say guess, it's going to speculate that you are having oil dilution based on your case use. Now, like in the winter, this issue gets a lot worse than in the summer, and that's why we always see a lot more comments during the winter, because one, you're putting in a little more fuel at every start, and two, you're maybe not getting the engine up to temperature. So that will allow that fuel to kind of hang out in there, and it ends up in your oil. The software knows that it compensates for temperature, and it makes the estimate of oil dilution a little bit more, whatever you want to say it. It's more inclined to guess that you're having an oil dilution issue during the winter. So what I've always said, try to avoid short engine runs, especially during the winter. Some people have this idea that you can put it in hybrid mode and set it, forget it. But if you have a lot of short engine runs on your daily commute every day, if you have 8 or 9 chances where you're stopping at stop signs and stop lights, or just slowing down the traffic, and you put your foot on the accelerator and the engine starts for a little while and then shuts off, watch that, pay attention to that, because if you're doing that over and over and over again, you could end up with an oil dilution issue because of how you're operating the vehicle. So it's always best to use electric mode whenever possible. And if the engine runs, make it run for a little while. Like, don't let it do a half-mile run and then shut it off every day or all the time. I mean, every once in a while it's not going to hurt, but it's one of those things that gets worse in the winter, of course. And so watch those short engine runs during the winter especially. Now, there is another issue that is lingering out there in 4xe land that I have no explanation for. When you get around 5 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 15 Celsius, the system is supposed to go into what's called an electric mode temporarily unavailable state. Now, if the EMTU message sounds familiar to you, if you get a bad electric coolant heater or a bad electric battery heater, you will get an EMTU cabin cooling or heating message. And so it'll say electric mode temporarily unavailable, cabin cooling or heating. Or as we like to say, EMU chalk, I think was the acronym we came up for that. So if at those temperatures, Jeep has designed it, when it gets down cold like that, you're not going to have electric mode. They've locked that out on purpose. One, the performance of the battery goes down, and it's really hard on the battery, and that's just the nature of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. You've got a gas engine, and the engineers engineer around the issues of a plug-in hybrid by doing that. Now, my Jeep, my particular 4xe, gives me that electric mode temporarily unavailable message at around 7 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, it's not exactly 5 degrees. And I don't see form. But what can happen is, for some reason, and this is the part I have no explanation for, the vehicle can go into displaying form when it's actually an EMTU scenario. And this has been a variable for years, and I don't know how to get Jeep to correct the issue. I don't know if they're aware of the issue. It's one of those things that, like, if they don't see like thousands of Jeeps having the issue, they're not going to pay attention to it. The end result is the same. Your engine is going to run. But what can happen is some people are trying to spend a lot of time clearing form when they're not in form to begin with. They're just in electric mode temporarily unavailable, but for some reason the display shows form instead of EMTU. So when I say the answer to the question of how to clear form is problematic, you don't know what kind of form you're in unless you have like an OBD reader like this one. If you don't have one of these and JScan, you have no way of reading those PIDs to see what's fired. And I can't tell you what those PIDs are. I've got a file saved on it, and that's something I probably should do a video on, but I'm not as readily knowledgeable about it to like just talk about it. But there are PIDs that will show up if you're actually in the oil dilution form, and there's different PIDs that show up if you're in electric mode temporarily unavailable, but it's just displaying form. So it's a very complicated thing, and people can spend a lot of time trying to clear form. And all I can tell you about that is, if you go for a long 20-30 minute drive, keep the RPMs up, get the temperature up. And when I say keep the RPMs up, take it over and shift it over into manual mode and get your RPMs up around 3,500, 4,000 to get the temperature up. And don't overdo it. Don't over rev this thing. You don't want to beat up your engine like that. But get the temperature up and try to burn that stuff off. And there is a product called Deform, and different people have made little things that go in the grill that block the airflow to warm that engine up quicker. Be cautious. If you're not familiar with the mechanics of gas engines, I don't recommend that for people, because you may be in an overheat scenario and you don't realize it because you're not like actively monitoring the system and everything. So it's something that I don't recommend for everybody, but if you know to watch your temperature gauge and know how to adapt and adjust your driving, or go pop the form covers out or whatever, then that's great. But that is definitely an aftermarket workaround that people have come up with, and it's a great idea. It kind of tricks the system and makes the thing run a little bit warmer so it doesn't get dilution as bad. So I hope that answers some questions. I know it creates others, but it is what it is. It's one of those scenarios where it's a problematic thing, and sometimes when it's just cold out, it's going to go into form and it's going to stay in form. And you can talk to some Canadians, they will tell you they're in form all winter. Although I made that blanket statement a couple of years ago, and I had a lot of Canadians, in my northern Canadians, not just ones now down near the U.S., but like people who really live in cold areas, that say they're not stuck in form all winter long. So there's variables. There's all sorts of variables, and one of them seems to be if you keep it in a garage, that's a little bit better. You know, it's a little bit warmer, and so I hope that helps. I hope you understand that. It's not the worst thing in the world. Pay attention to the temperature outside. If it's down in the single digits, it's okay. If it displays form, it's okay, because you're going to be running your engine anyway. Let it go. Don't try to clear it. Don't spend time trying to clear it or anything. If you think it's a 90-day thing, just fill up with the gas and see what it does. But if it's really, really cold, it's in single digits, let it ride. Don't try to spend a whole lot of time clearing it, because you're going to be running the engine anyway. Thanks for watching.